Welcome to our special Web Extra. We have a couple more of your questions on the Senate scandal, so let's get to it. Here in studio, as they were on air, we've got Jennifer Ditchburn, Rob Walsh, and Bill Fox to help us with the answers. Going first to this question by email from Caledonia, Prince Edward Island, Amy Swenson writes, did the Prime Minister bend or break the law when he appointed senators such as Mike Duffy and Pamela Wallin, who did not have their main residence in the province for which they were appointed? Mike, I guess Amy knows Mike Duffy, has not lived on PEI for decades. Does his appointment meet the requirements of residency set out in the laws dealing with Senate appointments? Bill.
Well, the Senate rules on residency are so convoluted that forensic accountants couldn't figure them out, so far be it from me to...
and that's the argument Duffy's used.
Well, right? and I think there is an absolute and clear distinction. The first is, in effect, qualification to have the seat, which is a constitutional issue, which is a fairly minimal ask, and I think both Senator Duffy and Senator Wallin meet that test.
That's land, owning land worth a certain amount of $4,000.
Yeah. The second test is, what is your primary residence for in terms of where you get to claim travel expenses, yes or no? And that's a very separate question, and that's at the root of much of the debate around Senator Duffy, I think.
I'm not sure if I understood Bill correctly there, but owning land in the province is a requirement, but also being resident in the province is a constitutional requirement. But the Constitutional Act of 1867 just says resident in the province. Yeah. I'm not aware of the court ever being asked to address that question as to what it means legally, but it's there. And then, as Bill was just saying, the other question, which is an internal question to the Senate, is this question of primary residence, designating a primary residence so as to entitle yourself to a living allowance for your secondary residence in Ottawa. Mm-hmm.
And the Prime Minister, as recently as yesterday, was upholding that qualification of $4,000. I mean, he didn't use the words $4,000 in his statement in the Commons, but he throughout has said that's enough to say that you're a resident of a particular province. And as Mac Harb, the Liberal senator who has now resigned and was also caught up in this whole controversy, has said there aren't any rules that say you have to spend X number of days or X number of hours at one residence or the other, hence all the confusion that has brought us to this point.
Right. Yeah, the thing I find interesting about it is in the Duffy case in particular, is there's nobody on the Hill who didn't know that Mike Duffy was living in Ottawa. It's not like he was going to PEI on the weekends. Right, but he knew he was in Ottawa.
But it's compounded, Peter, by the letter that was written by somebody on Senator LeBreton's staff before these two senators were even sworn in that stated, we don't care where you live, basically.
Yeah.
Like, that's a big complicating feature. If you tell me it doesn't matter where I live, then...
Yes, I think there are huge complications flowing from the internal discussion of this question that work in favor of Senator Duffy and possibly Pamela Wallin as well.
Right. All right, here's the last question we have for you tonight. It comes from Kathy Gorman in New Brunswick. It's also by email. If the investigation into the Wright-Duffy check shows that the Prime Minister was in fact aware of what was transpiring, then it would appear he lied to the House of Commons and the Canadian people. If this is the case, could he be removed from office? And if so, what would that process be? Now, that's a little, somewhat the same as the last question on the broadcast edition, which you all knocked down in terms of something happening along those lines. But this is a little bit different. Is there a process in the House of Commons if you're caught fibbing?
Well, somebody in the Commons could stand up, an MP, and say that the Commons has been misled, ask the Speaker for a ruling. The Speaker would probably punt it to a committee. The committee would examine it and come to a conclusion. You could have a vote of non-confidence based on contempt of Parliament, the Prime Minister being contempt. But this being a majority Conservative government, it's hard to imagine a scenario where a majority of members in the House would vote yes to bringing down the government in that case. So again, I think it's a political question, and whether the members of your own party and other eminent people in the party would come forward and say, you need to step down.
Every question in the House of Commons is a political question as opposed to a legal. But the only qualifier on what Jennifer was just saying is that it's not that you have to show the Prime Minister, in this case, misled the House, but that he deliberately misled the House. In other words, he could have said something that proves to be untrue or false, but unintentionally so. And the hard part in anything of this, along these lines is to demonstrate that he knew better and that what he said was said deliberately and known to be untrue.
But even if the answer was yes on all of those things, What's the penalty?
Well, I think a prime minister has two jobs. One is as an officer of parliament. The other is as a leader of the party. And I think Jennifer is quite right. I think the pressure would come from the party, and that's where the change would be affected. It would be affected at the level of the leadership of the party.
But technically, the penalty is what?
Well, you say technically, but it's hard to, as Jennifer was saying, credibly talk about technical possibilities in the House of Commons. Technically, he could be, as Jennifer says, be held in contempt, or technically
Yeah, but what does that mean? He wouldn't have to resign his seat.
No.
He'd be just...
He's still the Crown's first minister. He's still Prime Minister of the Government of Canada. He just may be a persona non grata in the House for 24 hours or 48 hours, whatever it is they choose to do by way of a penalty. This is all getting very, very unrealistic, and I'm afraid there is no redress of a kind that you can put any faith in along lines of a penalty as such.
All right, we'll leave it at that. This was fun. Thank you all for doing it. Thank you.
Thank
Bill,
you.
Jennifer, Rob. That's our Web Extra for tonight. Thanks so much to you all, and thank you for the questions. Keep them coming at cbcnews.ca/thenational.